If you've ever imagined that you might do reasonably well in feudal Japan, this is where that idea gently lies down and goes to sleep. Not dramatically, just quietly. Before we begin, remember to softly press subscribe if you enjoy this kind of slow, sleepy history. No rush. Now, imagine waking up in Japan sometime between the 12th and 17th centuries. There is no alarm clock, but your body wakes you anyway because it is cold, hungry, and vaguely uncomfortable. The floor beneath you is hard. The walls are thin. The idea of personal comfort has not yet been fully invented. You stretch, but stretching doesn't really help. Outside, someone is already working, because in feudal Japan, the day starts early and ends late, and nobody asked how you're feeling about it. If you are a peasant, and statistically, you almost certainly are, your life is mostly labor, obedience, and hoping nothing goes wrong today. And things go wrong often. Rice farming, which sounds peaceful in theory, is actually a long-term relationship with mud, insects, weather anxiety, and back pain. You spend hours bent over, standing in water, wondering if the harvest will survive floods, droughts, or taxes. The taxes, by the way, are non-negotiable. You don't pay them in money. You pay them in rice. The same rice you were planning to eat. This is considered normal. You might briefly think about complaining, but the social structure of feudal Japan has anticipated this thought and firmly discouraged it. Above you in the hierarchy are samurai, who are not there to help you emotionally. Samurai have swords, status, and rules about honor that do not include listening to peasants. If you offend one, even accidentally, the consequences can be swift and permanent. There is no appeals process. There is just a sword, and then significantly less you. So you bow. You bow a lot. You bow even when you're not sure if you should be bowing, just in case. The rules are complex, unspoken, and enforced with confidence. Clothing does not help much either. Layers exist, but warmth is inconsistent. Winters are cold, summers are humid, and hygiene is a daily negotiation with limited resources. Bathing does happen, which is good, but illness still spreads easily. If you get sick, there is medicine, technically, but survival is far from guaranteed. Life expectancy is not trying to impress anyone. Food is simple and repetitive. Rice, vegetables, maybe some fish if you are lucky and near water. Meat is rare. Sugar is rarer. Snacks, as a concept, have not arrived yet. If you are born into a merchant family, things improve slightly, financially at least, but socially, you are still below the warrior class. You can be rich and still be considered inferior, which is a unique way of keeping things humbling. Travel is slow and regulated. You cannot simply decide to go somewhere else because you feel like a change of scenery. Roads have checkpoints. Papers are checked. Suspicion is the default. Privacy is minimal. Your village knows your business. Your lord knows your village's business. Everyone knows who belongs where, and mobility, social or physical, is limited. Entertainment exists, but it is quiet and communal. Stories, festivals, rituals, no screens, no distractions, just long evenings and the sound of wind, insects, and your own thoughts, which, after a long day of labor, are mostly about sleep. By the end of the day, you lie down again on the hard floor, body sore, stomach not quite full, hoping tomorrow will be roughly the same and not worse. In feudal Japan, survival isn't about adventure or glory. It's about endurance, compliance, and getting through one more ordinary day. And statistically speaking, that first day is where most modern people would quietly stop lasting. The next morning arrives without enthusiasm. You wake again before you feel ready, because readiness is not part of the schedule. Your muscles are sore in places you did not previously know existed, and the floor has not softened overnight out of sympathy. Outside, the village is already moving, quietly and efficiently, like it has been doing this for generations without asking for feedback. In feudal Japan, routine is not just a habit, it is survival. Deviating from it invites attention, and attention is rarely helpful. If you are a farmer, your day resumes in the fields. If you are a craft worker, you return to repetitive, precise labor that demands patience more than creativity. Tools are simple. Mistakes are costly. There is no safety net, only consequences that arrive calmly and stay for a long time. Children work early. Elderly people work until they can't. Rest is something you earn briefly, usually at night, and even then it is incomplete. Social order surrounds everything you do. You know exactly where you stand, and so does everyone else. This clarity is efficient, but not comforting. If you are born poor, you remain poor. If you are born into status, You carry its expectations constantly. Samurai, for example, do not have an easy life either, despite the popular image. They train endlessly, live under strict codes of behavior, and are always being observed. Honor is fragile. Reputation matters more than happiness. A single failure can undo years of loyalty. There is pressure in every direction, and very little space to be human about it. Laws are harsh, but inconsistently applied, depending on who you are and who you offend. Punishments are public. They are meant to be instructive, and they work. You learn quickly what not to do, mostly by watching what happens to others. Crime is not romantic. It is desperate, and justice is not gentle. Even small disputes can escalate because there is no neutral authority you trust to handle things quietly. Religion and belief offer structure and comfort, but also reinforce the order of things. The universe has rules, and so does society. Accepting your place is considered wise. Wanting more is considered dangerous. Education exists, but it is limited. Literacy is not universal. Knowledge is passed through apprenticeships, family lines, and careful observation. Curiosity is useful, but only when applied correctly. Asking the wrong questions can make people uncomfortable, and discomfort leads to suspicion. Suspicion is not your friend. Medical care remains basic. Herbal remedies, prayer, rest, if you are fortunate enough to afford it. If an injury becomes infected, the village quietly prepares for loss. Death is common, visible, and accepted without ceremony beyond ritual. People grieve, but life continues because it has to. There is no pause button for hardship. Weather remains one of the most powerful forces in your life. A bad season can mean hunger. Several bad seasons can mean collapse. You have no control over this, only endurance. Community matters deeply because isolation is dangerous. You rely on your neighbors even when they annoy you, even when you disagree, because survival is collective. At night, after another long day, the village settles again into darkness. Candles and oil lamps are used sparingly. Silence is natural. There is time to think, but thinking often leads back to the same conclusion. Tomorrow will be similar. Not better, not worse, just similar, if you are lucky. Feudal Japan is not constantly violent or dramatic. Most days are quiet, repetitive, and physically demanding. That is what makes it difficult. There is no escape through novelty or comfort. Only structure, duty, and time moving forward at its own unbothered pace. By now, you are still alive, technically, but lasting longer would require adjusting your expectations, your body, and your entire sense of what a good life looks like. And that adjustment, for most modern people, would already be exhausting. By the third day, the initial shock has faded, replaced by something quieter and heavier. This is the realization phase. You are no longer surprised by the discomfort. You simply accept it, because resisting it would require energy you do not have. Your body has adjusted just enough to function, but not enough to feel good. Hunger is constant, like background noise. You eat when food is available, not when you feel like it, and meals are brief, practical affairs. Flavor exists, but excitement does not. Eating is about continuing, not enjoying. Clothing is worn again, repaired when it tears, reused until it can no longer pretend to be useful. Nothing is disposable, including your own energy. Time in feudal Japan moves differently. There are no clocks governing every moment, only the sun, the seasons, and expectation. Work continues until it is dark or until the task is done, whichever comes later. Conversation happens, but it is subdued. People are careful with words. Gossip exists, but it travels slowly and settles deeply. Reputation is everything in a world where records are few and memory is long. If someone decides you are unreliable, that decision may outlive you. Authority is always nearby, even when unseen. Local officials, village heads, samurai retainers, they are not present every moment, but the idea of them is. This is often enough. Rules are learned by observation rather than explanation. You watch who bows first. You notice who speaks and who stays silent. You copy what keeps others safe. Innovation is risky. Doing things the way they have always been done is safer, even if it is inefficient or painful. Pain, after all, is familiar. Disease continues to be an uninvited participant in daily life. Minor injuries can become serious. Fevers are feared. Childbirth is dangerous. Aging is not gentle. There is no illusion of control over the body. You work until you can't, and then you rely on family or community, hoping they can afford to support you. Family structure is strict. Duty flows upward and downward, parents to children, children to parents. Individual desire is secondary to obligation. Marriage is practical. Love may develop, but it is not required. Stability matters more than romance. If you are lucky, you find companionship in shared endurance. If not, you endure alone, quietly. News from outside the village is rare and often troubling. Wars happen elsewhere, but their effects reach you anyway through increased taxes, conscription, or shortages. You may never see a battlefield, but you will feel its weight. Samurai pass through occasionally, reminders that violence exists even when it is not actively happening. Their presence changes the air. People straighten their backs, voices lower. The social order tightens itself without being asked. Festivals offer brief relief. Music, dance, rituals marking the passage of seasons. These moments matter more than they might seem, because they interrupt the sameness. For a short time, people are allowed to feel something other than fatigue. Then it ends, and work resumes. There is no concept of burnout, only persistence. By now, you understand why lasting a single day was already ambitious. Feudal Japan does not defeat you with chaos. It wears you down with consistency. Every day demands the same effort, the same restraint, the same acceptance. There are no shortcuts, no upgrades, no escape routes that don't involve serious risk. Survival depends less on strength than on conformity and patience. And while it is possible, clearly, millions did it, you begin to see that doing so requires becoming someone else entirely. Someone quieter, someone tougher, someone willing to let go of comfort, choice, and expectation. By the end of this third day, you lie down again on the floor, listening to the familiar sounds of night, insects, wind, distant movement. You are no longer imagining a better version of this life. You are simply hoping tomorrow does not demand more than you can give. And in feudal Japan, that hope is modest, practical, and entirely reasonable. By the fourth day, your sense of self has begun to quietly adjust its boundaries. You no longer think in terms of what you want, only in terms of what is expected next. This is not despair exactly. It is adaptation. In feudal Japan, adaptation is the closest thing to comfort you will find. You wake, you work, you respond. Decisions are small and mostly already made for you. This removes a certain kind of stress, but replaces it with another, the constant need to not stand out. Standing out invites questions. Questions invite scrutiny. Scrutiny rarely ends well. You begin to understand that the safest way to exist is to be useful and predictable. The village functions on mutual dependence, but also on quiet surveillance. Everyone notices everything. If you are late, if you speak oddly, if you behave differently, someone remembers. Memory here is a form of record-keeping. Privacy is minimal, not because people are invasive, but because space is shared and lives overlap constantly. Even sleep is not entirely private. Homes are small, sounds travel, dreams are interrupted easily. Work continues to shape your body, hands harden, posture changes. Pain becomes something you carry rather than something you fix. There is no expectation of relief, only of endurance. Weather remains indifferent. Rain turns paths to mud. Heat makes labor heavier. Cold slows everything, but does not stop it. There are no days off for discomfort. Clothing absorbs sweat, then dries, then absorbs again. Washing is efficient, not luxurious. Water is valued. Waste is managed carefully. Everything has a purpose, including you. Food shortages are discussed quietly, without panic, because panic is unproductive. People ration instinctively. Children learn early to eat what is given without complaint. Complaining solves nothing and marks you as immature. Elders speak less, but when they do, people listen. Experience carries weight in a world where survival itself is an achievement. Conflict exists, but it is restrained. Open arguments are rare. Tension is expressed through silence, avoidance, or subtle shifts in behavior. When conflicts do surface, they are handled quickly and decisively by those with authority. Fairness is not guaranteed. Order is. Spiritual practices continue in the background of daily life, woven into routine rather than set apart from it. Shrines are visited, rituals observed, not necessarily out of deep belief, but because continuity matters. These practices remind people that life has structure beyond immediate hardship. That structure, whether cosmic or social, provides stability. You start to notice how little entertainment there is, and how little that matters. With no constant stimulation, the mind slows. Thoughts repeat. Reflection becomes unavoidable. This can be calming or unsettling, depending on the day. Night arrives again, quietly, predictably. Lamps are dimmed. The village settles. You lie down with a body that feels older than it did 4 days ago. Not broken, just worn. You are still here. That alone feels like a small success. Feudal Japan does not reward you for this. It does not acknowledge your effort. It simply continues. And now, so do you. By the 5th day, the idea of counting days has already started to feel unnecessary. Days are no longer distinct units of time. They blend together into one extended stretch of obligation, interrupted only by sleep and the gradual wearing down of your body. You wake up not because the day feels new, but because waking up is simply what happens next. Your movements have become more efficient, not faster, just quieter. You know where things are. You know which tasks must be done first. You know which people to avoid eye contact with and which ones require a polite nod. This is progress, technically. In feudal Japan, progress does not feel rewarding. It feels invisible. The work itself remains unchanged. Fields still need tending. Goods still need producing. Repairs are constant, because materials are limited and nothing is built with excess. When something breaks, it is fixed again and again until it no longer can be, and then it becomes something else. This applies equally to objects and, eventually, to people. You begin to notice how little margin there is for error. A missed task, a poorly done job, a misunderstood instruction can have consequences that ripple outward. Someone else may have to work longer. Someone may lose face. Someone higher up may take notice. None of these outcomes are desirable. So you focus, you repeat, you do not experiment. The social hierarchy continues to define every interaction. Even casual conversations follow invisible rules. Who speaks first? Who listens longer? Who ends the exchange? These details matter. They keep everything in place. Samurai remain distant figures, but their presence is always implied. You hear stories. You hear warnings disguised as advice. You adjust your behavior accordingly. Fear is not constant, but awareness is. Markets, when you visit them, are busy but restrained. Trade happens under watchful eyes. Bargaining exists, but it is polite and limited. Everyone understands the boundaries. Stepping outside them makes people uncomfortable. Travel through checkpoints reinforces the feeling that the world is divided into permitted spaces and forbidden ones. Belonging is conditional. Documents matter. Recognition matters. Being known matters. Illness still looms in the background. A cough draws attention. A fever draws concern. Not always compassion, but concern about disruption. Communities care deeply, but they also calculate. Resources are finite. Survival requires difficult decisions that are made quietly and without ceremony. You begin to understand why people speak less about the future. Long-term planning exists, but it is cautious. Dreams are small. Stability is the highest aspiration. Anything more ambitious risks attracting misfortune. At night, fatigue arrives before reflection. You lie down and sleep comes quickly, not because you are peaceful, but because your body insists. There are dreams sometimes, but they are vague and fragmentary. When you wake, they fade immediately, replaced by the weight of the day. By now, lasting a day no longer feels like the challenge. Lasting years does. Feudal Japan does not push you to your limits all at once. It slowly teaches you that your limits are closer than you thought, and that living within them is the only acceptable option. You are still here, still functioning, still useful. That is enough, for now. By the 6th day, you begin to realize that effort in feudal Japan is not measured by how hard you try, but by how little trouble you cause. Excellence is subtle. It looks like tasks completed without comment and days passing without incident. Praise, when it exists, is indirect. You are noticed most clearly when something goes wrong, so your goal becomes simple: do not be memorable. This mindset settles in slowly and then stays. Work continues with the same steady rhythm. Muscles ache less sharply now, not because they have healed, but because they have accepted their role. Pain has become informational rather than alarming. You adjust your movements to avoid it where possible and ignore it when you can't. This is considered maturity. Meals remain sparse and predictable. You learn to appreciate consistency. The same food, eaten daily, creates a kind of calm. Variety is not expected. Surplus is not trusted. Anything extra is saved, shared, or taxed away. Waste is quietly disapproved of. Children observe all of this closely. They are learning not through instruction, but through exposure. By watching adults endure without complaint, they absorb the same expectations. Childhood is short, responsibility arrives early and without announcement. By now, you have internalized the village's tempo. You move when others move. You rest when others rest. Silence has meaning. So does stillness. Loudness is unnecessary. Expressiveness is restrained. Emotional displays are not forbidden, but they are contained. Grief is ritualized. Joy is brief. Anger is dangerous. You become careful with your face. Even alone, you do not fully relax it. Authority continues to exist, mostly in implication. Local officials appear occasionally, usually to collect, inspect, or remind. These visits are formal and efficient. No one argues. Questions are minimal. The structure is familiar, and familiarity is comforting, even when the structure itself is unforgiving. News arrives again, this time of unrest somewhere far away. It does not change your routine, but it adds weight to it. You know that if conflict spreads, your life will become harder without warning. More taxes, more labor, possibly conscription. None of this will come with explanation. Preparation is limited to acceptance. Spiritual life continues quietly. You notice how rituals punctuate time, giving shape to days that would otherwise blur completely. A visit to a shrine, a seasonal observance, a brief pause to acknowledge something larger than daily survival. These moments do not remove hardship, but they place it within a story that has existed longer than you have. That story matters. It reminds people that suffering is not personal, it is structural. As night falls again, you notice how quickly it feels normal now. The darkness no longer feels ominous, it feels expected. Lamps are dim, voices lower. You lie down without ceremony. Sleep arrives as a necessity, not a reward. You no longer think about whether you could survive here. You are surviving. The question has shifted to whether surviving like this, day after day, year after year, would eventually feel like a life rather than an obligation. In feudal Japan, that answer varies, but it is rarely enthusiastic. Still, the world does not ask for enthusiasm, it asks for continuity, and by the 6th day, you have learned how to provide it. By the 7th day, something subtle happens. You stop comparing this life to the one you remember, not because this life is better, but because comparison requires imagination, and imagination feels inefficient here. Feudal Japan does not reward inner worlds, it rewards alignment. You wake, and your body moves before your thoughts catch up. The day unfolds in a sequence that feels inevitable rather than chosen. Tasks are completed with practiced restraint. You conserve motion, you conserve words. Even your breathing seems quieter, as if the environment prefers it that way. You notice small details now because there is little else to notice. The way light hits the ground in the morning, the specific sound of tools against wood or stone, the rhythm of footsteps passing outside. These details are not beautiful exactly, but they are consistent, and consistency has become valuable. Relationships settle into patterns. You know who speaks kindly and who speaks carefully. You know who expects help and who avoids offering it. There is no resentment in this understanding, just clarity. Everyone is operating within limits they did not choose. Trust is practical rather than emotional. You trust people to do what is expected of them, not to exceed it. Excess is suspicious. Generosity exists, but it is measured. Giving too much can imply criticism or create obligation. Everything has balance, and imbalance draws attention. Authority, again, remains present without being visible. Rules are followed because they are known, not because they are constantly enforced. This is more effective than fear alone. You enforce them on yourself now. Correct posture, correct timing, correct distance. Mistakes still happen, but they are smaller. You have learned where precision matters and where approximation is acceptable. This knowledge is not written down, it is absorbed. You realize that most people here are not miserable in the dramatic sense. They are tired, constrained, and cautious, but they are not constantly suffering. They have adapted their expectations to fit the world, and in doing so, reduced disappointment. This is not optimism, it is calibration. You begin to understand why stories of rebellion or escape are rare and risky. Leaving the structure means losing its protection. Outside it, survival becomes uncertain in a different, often worse way. Within it, at least, the rules are familiar. Food arrives again, simple and adequate. Hunger remains, but it is managed. Your body has adjusted to scarcity in ways it did not ask permission for. You feel weaker than before, but also more efficient. There is less waste in you now. Illness still threatens, but you notice how people respond to it with quiet pragmatism. Care is given. Space is made. If someone does not recover, the community absorbs the loss and continues. Grief does not stop the work. It cannot. Time does not pause out of respect. Evening arrives with its usual lack of ceremony. The village settles into a familiar quiet. You lie down and realize that fear has faded, not because danger is gone, but because it is constant. Constant things stop triggering alarm. They become background. This is both comforting and concerning, but there is no mechanism for concern that does not interfere with survival. By the end of the 7th day, you are no longer testing whether you can endure feudal Japan. You are participating in it. You have learned how to take up less space, how to move without friction, how to exist without demanding explanation. That is the real threshold. Once crossed, life continues not because it is kind, but because you have learned how to fit inside it. By the 8th day, you realize that silence in feudal Japan is not empty. It is functional. It allows work to happen without distraction, authority to remain unquestioned, and emotions to stay contained. You participate in this silence now without thinking about it. Conversations are short and purposeful. Long explanations feel unnecessary. Everyone already understands the constraints. Repeating them would only waste time. You notice how rarely people ask why. Instructions are followed as given, because questioning motives implies doubt, and doubt implies instability. Stability, here, is everything. Your body continues its quiet transformation. Movements are smaller. Gestures are restrained. You waste less energy, correcting mistakes, because you make fewer of them. Not from creativity, but from repetition. This efficiency is not celebrated. It is assumed. Workspaces remain plain. Tools are kept close. Possessions are minimal, not out of philosophy, but out of necessity. Owning less means managing less, and management is a form of labor. You begin to appreciate how much effort is required simply to maintain what already exists. Houses need constant care. Roofs leak. Wood rots. Insects arrive uninvited and stay. Repair is continuous, and completion is temporary. This gives life a certain humility. Nothing is finished. Everything is maintained. Social roles continue to shape every interaction. You notice that even moments of rest are regulated. Resting too long appears lazy. Resting too little appears suspicious. Balance is enforced socially, not officially. People watch one another not to judge, but to ensure the rhythm holds. The rhythm matters more than individuals. When someone disrupts it, even unintentionally, discomfort spreads quickly. Not anger, discomfort. And discomfort motivates correction. Food shortages are discussed again, this time more openly. Weather has been unpredictable. Harvest expectations are adjusted downward. No one reacts dramatically. Plans are made quietly. Portions are reduced slightly. Everyone notices. No one comments. This collective restraint is unsettling at first, then strangely reassuring. Panic is inefficient. Calm scarcity feels safer. You also begin to understand how boredom functions here. It is not considered a problem. Boredom is simply the absence of immediate danger. It gives the mind space to rest, even if the body cannot. With no constant novelty, attention settles on routine. There is comfort in knowing what tomorrow will look like. Even if it is difficult, it is known. Spiritual life remains understated. Rituals continue, not as emotional experiences, but as markers of time. They remind people that life moves in cycles larger than any single hardship. This perspective does not remove suffering, but it prevents it from feeling random. Random suffering is harder to endure than predictable hardship. Night comes again. You lie down and realize that your thoughts no longer race before sleep. There is nothing urgent to plan, nothing to optimize. The structure already exists, and you fit inside it. Sleep arrives steadily, without resistance. By the 8th day, feudal Japan has not defeated you. It has absorbed you. You are functioning within its limits, contributing without excess, surviving without complaint. This is not triumph, it is alignment. And in a world built on endurance rather than progress, alignment is as close to success as anyone gets. By the 9th day, you begin to notice how little this life asks of your opinions. This is not accidental. In feudal Japan, opinions complicate things. They introduce alternatives, and alternatives suggest that the current order is optional. It is not. What is asked of you instead is reliability, showing up, doing the work correctly, not forcing anyone else to adjust around you. This expectation feels heavy at first, then oddly relieving. Without the burden of self-expression, there is less internal conflict. You are not deciding who you want to be. You are performing who you already are. Daily labor continues with mechanical precision. Hands move automatically. Your mind drifts, but not far. There is nowhere useful for it to go. Fantasies fade quickly when they have no practical application. You still think, but your thinking has narrowed. It focuses on sequence, timing, avoidance of error. This focus makes the day pass faster, not because it is enjoyable, but because it is predictable. You become more aware of how discipline functions here. It is not enforced through constant punishment, but through mutual expectation. Everyone knows what is required, and everyone notices when someone falls short. Shame is quiet, but powerful. It does not shout. It lingers. You adjust your behavior to avoid it, not out of fear, but out of practicality. Conflict resolution remains indirect. Tension is expressed through pauses, glances, changes in tone. Direct confrontation is rare and uncomfortable. When it does happen, it is brief and final. There is no extended argument. The outcome matters more than the process. You also begin to notice how age changes everything. Younger people move faster, carry more, recover quicker. Older people move less, but are treated with deference. They have lasted longer, and that longevity itself commands respect. Advice from elders is practical, not philosophical. It is about what works, not what feels right. Illness returns to the edges of the village again. Someone has a fever. Others keep their distance while still ensuring food arrives. Care is given without closeness. Survival requires a careful balance between compassion and caution. Death, when it occurs, is acknowledged with ritual, then absorbed into routine. There is sadness, but no interruption of labor. This is not cruelty, it is necessity. You begin to understand that emotional restraint here is not about suppressing feeling, but about preventing collapse. If everyone stopped to fully process every loss, nothing would continue. Food would not be grown. Shelters would not be repaired. Life would stall. So people grieve in measured ways and move forward. Evenings feel shorter now, not because time has changed, but because your energy has. You eat, clean, prepare for the next day, and lie down. There is little left for reflection. Sleep arrives without resistance. By the 9th day, the question of whether you would last a day in feudal Japan feels almost irrelevant. You are past the dramatic threshold. What remains is attrition, the slow wearing down of the body, the quiet narrowing of the self, the steady trade of choice for stability. Feudal Japan does not overwhelm you with chaos. It reshapes you through repetition, and by now, that reshaping is well underway. By the 10th day, you stop noticing the effort it takes to be careful. Caution has become automatic. You no longer scan situations consciously for danger or missteps. Your body does it for you. This is how people last here. Not through constant vigilance, but through habits so ingrained they feel natural. You bow without thinking. You pause before speaking. You wait for cues that may never be spoken aloud. The day unfolds again in its familiar shape. Work begins early. Tasks are completed in the same order. Corrections are made quietly. There is no sense of achievement when something goes well, only the absence of problems. This absence is valued. A day without incident is a successful day. You begin to notice how little urgency exists, even when conditions are harsh. There is pressure, certainly, but it is long-term pressure, spread thinly over time. Panic would waste energy. Speed would invite mistakes. Everything is done deliberately, even when the pace is demanding. This deliberate slowness is not kindness. It is efficiency adapted to endurance. You also begin to feel the limits of your body more clearly. Strength fluctuates. Some mornings you feel capable, others you feel fragile. There is no allowance for this variation. Work continues regardless. You learn to ration yourself internally, giving just enough effort to meet expectations and saving the rest for later. This internal calculation happens constantly now, without conscious thought. Social interactions remain stable. You know your place among others. There are no surprises. Familiarity has replaced anxiety. You are no longer worried about doing the wrong thing because you have learned what right looks like. It is narrow, but it is clear. News arrives again, quietly, of policy changes or shifting authority somewhere above your level. It may affect taxes. It may affect labor demands. You listen, acknowledge, and adjust. There is no discussion about fairness. Fairness is not a category used here. Order is. Stability is. Those are the metrics by which decisions are judged. Food remains adequate but unsatisfying. You eat because it is time to eat. Hunger is managed, not eliminated. Comfort remains minimal. You no longer think about how uncomfortable things are. Discomfort has become the baseline against which nothing is compared. Moments of relative ease feel noticeable, even luxurious, despite being objectively small. A slightly warmer night. A meal that fills you more than expected. These moments pass quickly, but they are noted. As night falls, you lie down and realize that the life you once imagined returning to feels distant and vague. Not because it is forgotten, but because it no longer feels relevant. Feudal Japan has not erased your identity. It has simply taught you which parts of it are unnecessary here. What remains is functional, restrained, and durable. By the 10th day, you are no longer enduring feudal Japan as an outsider. You are existing within it as it expects you to. And that, more than strength or courage, is what lasting here actually requires. By the 11th day, you begin to sense how deeply time is embedded in everything here. Not measured time, but accumulated time. Generations of repetition have worn smooth paths into daily life, and you are now moving along them without resistance. The routines you follow are older than you are, older than anyone you know, and this age gives them authority. You do not question them, because questioning feels unnecessary, almost childish. The day begins as expected. Work resumes where it left off, because nothing truly ends. Tasks are not completed, they are paused. You take over where someone else once stood, and eventually someone else will take over from you. This continuity is quietly reassuring. You are replaceable, but you are also part of something that continues regardless. Your body continues to adapt in small, irreversible ways. Calluses thicken, movements become economical. Fatigue no longer announces itself loudly. It hums in the background. You have learned to live inside it. You notice how people conserve emotion the same way they conserve resources. Strong feelings are not expressed unless necessary. This does not mean people feel less. It means they manage feeling carefully, the way one manages fire, useful, dangerous, and never left unattended. Conversations remain practical. Advice is given when requested, not offered freely. Interference can be disrespectful. Everyone is assumed to know their responsibilities. Help is given when needed, but always with an awareness of cost. Reciprocity matters. Debts are remembered quietly. Favors linger until repaid. This is not cruelty. It is accounting. The social fabric depends on balance. Authority still moves above you, largely unseen. Decisions are made elsewhere, then drift downward in the form of new expectations. You adapt without protest. Protest would not reach anyone who could change things, and would only mark you as difficult. Difficulty is unsafe. You begin to notice how rarely anyone speaks about happiness. The concept exists, but it is not emphasized. Contentment is closer, but even that is understated. The goal is not to feel good. The goal is to continue functioning without disruption. Anything beyond that is incidental. Weather shifts again. The air feels heavier. Work becomes more tiring. No one comments. Commenting would not change the weather. Preparation replaces complaint. Tools are checked. Roofs are reinforced where possible. People anticipate hardship without dramatizing it. This anticipatory calm is unsettling at first, then strangely effective. When difficulties arrive, they are met with readiness rather than shock. Evening arrives with its familiar quiet. You eat, clean, prepare, sleep. The cycle holds. Lying down, you realize that fear, longing, and ambition have all faded to low levels. Not gone, but muted. In their place is a steady awareness of what tomorrow will require. This awareness is enough to fill the mind. By the 11th day, feudal Japan feels less like an environment and more like a system you operate within. You are no longer testing yourself against it. You are maintaining equilibrium inside it. That equilibrium is fragile, but it is real. And maintaining it, day after day, is the unspoken work of everyone around you. By the 12th day, you begin to understand that effort here is cumulative in ways you cannot reverse. Every small strain, every missed rest, every day, worked while slightly unwell, has settled into your body like sediment. There is no single breaking point, just a gradual thickening of fatigue that makes everything feel heavier than it should. You move anyway. Everyone does. Stopping is not framed as a choice, but as a failure of circumstance. The day unfolds with its usual predictability. Work is done alongside others, but mostly alone in feeling. There is companionship, but it is quiet, practical, and rarely verbal. You share space, tools, and exhaustion. That is enough. Words would add little. You notice how carefully people pace themselves, not lazily, not slowly, but sustainably. Bursts of effort are avoided unless necessary. This is a long life measured in seasons, not sprints. Those who rush burn out quickly and become burdens, something no one wants to be. You learn to distribute your energy evenly, like rations. Authority appears briefly today. An inspection, polite, formal, efficient. You lower your gaze, answer when spoken to, and do not volunteer information. This interaction lasts only minutes, but the tension it creates lingers longer. When authority leaves, people exhale without remark and return to work. No one comments on it. Acknowledging the tension would only prolong it. Food tastes the same as it always does. You no longer think of it in terms of preference. It is fuel. You eat enough to continue and stop before excess. Excess feels wrong now, even if it were available. Comfort has been redefined downward so thoroughly that the absence of discomfort is enough. Illness passes through the village again, lightly this time. A few people cough. Work adjusts subtly. Tasks are redistributed without discussion. There is no public concern, only quiet accommodation. This adaptability keeps things moving. You notice how little resentment exists despite how hard life is. Not because people are content, but because resentment requires imagining alternatives. Imagining alternatives is risky. It leads to dissatisfaction, and dissatisfaction has no productive outlet here. Better to accept what is and manage it well. Night comes again, predictable and dim. As you lie down, your thoughts are no longer about escape or endurance. They are logistical. What must be done tomorrow? What can be repaired? What can be conserved? By the 12th day, feudal Japan has narrowed your mental horizon without violence or persuasion. It has done so through repetition and necessity. You are still capable of thought, of feeling, of wanting. You simply keep those things aligned with survival. And alignment, here, is the difference between lasting and quietly disappearing. By the 13th day, you realize that anticipation has mostly vanished. You no longer look ahead with hope or dread. Tomorrow is not a concept you emotionally engage with. It is simply the next segment of work, already implied by today. This absence of anticipation is not emptiness. It is efficiency. Without emotional forecasting, the mind conserves energy. You wake, move, work, and rest, with minimal internal commentary. Your inner voice has learned to be brief. The village continues its slow, coordinated motion. People pass one another with small acknowledgments that require no interpretation. Roles are clear. Boundaries are respected. Friction is avoided, not through kindness, but through precision. Everyone knows how close to stand, how long to speak, when to step back. These unspoken measurements create stability. Your body continues to carry accumulated strain, but it no longer feels urgent. There is no expectation that discomfort should be fixed. It is simply managed. You adjust posture. You favor one side briefly, then switch. You make small calculations constantly, none of them dramatic. This is how people age here, not suddenly, but gradually, almost politely. Work remains repetitive, but repetition has dulled its sharpness. You no longer resent it. Resentment requires comparison, and comparison has faded. There is only task and completion, followed by the next task. Completion itself offers no satisfaction, only transition. Authority remains distant today, but its influence is still felt. You hear reminders passed quietly between people, a regulation here, an expectation there. Information flows sideways more than downward. This is safer. No one wants to appear too informed or too ignorant. Balance is maintained through careful listening. Food arrives again, adequate and plain. Eating has become automatic. You no longer pause to consider hunger. Your body signals when it must be fed, and you respond without negotiation. Even appetite has learned restraint. Emotional expression remains minimal. You notice that laughter exists, but it is short and controlled. Humor does not linger. It appears briefly, then dissolves back into work. This does not feel joyless. It feels contained. Too much joy would disrupt the rhythm, just as too much sorrow would. Both are managed. Weather shifts again. The air changes slightly. People notice, but no one comments. Adjustments are made quietly, clothing layered, tasks reordered. Adaptation is constant and uncelebrated. Night comes with its usual quiet authority. Lamps are dim, sounds soften. You lie down and realize that the life you are living no longer feels temporary. Not permanent either, just ongoing. By the 13th day, feudal Japan has not broken you or inspired you. It has trained you. Trained you to move steadily, to feel selectively, to think within limits that preserve function. This training is subtle and effective. You fall asleep without reflection, not because there is nothing to think about, but because thinking has learned when to stop. By the 14th day, you begin to sense how invisible time has become. Not slow, not fast, just present, pressing evenly from all sides. Days no longer feel counted, they feel occupied. You wake because waking is required, not because morning feels distinct. The light looks familiar, the air feels familiar. Even fatigue has settled into a predictable shape. There are no surprises left in it. Work begins again, quietly, efficiently. You notice how rarely anyone rushes, even when there is much to do. Speed is treated with caution. Fast movements draw attention. Attention invites correction. Correction costs energy. So everything proceeds at a measured pace that prioritizes continuity over completion. You understand now that finishing things is less important than keeping them going. Your body continues to function, but you can feel its margins narrowing. Recovery takes longer. Small strains linger. There is no language for this, no complaint system to register it with. People notice decline, but they do not name it. Naming would imply the possibility of change. Instead, tasks are adjusted subtly. Someone lifts less. Someone walks slower. No one announces why. This quiet accommodation is how care is given. Social interactions remain steady. You have learned who expects deference and who does not require it. You have learned which silences are neutral and which ones signal displeasure. This knowledge feels heavier than words, but it is reliable. You carry it without question. Authority remains distant, but reminders of it pass through conversation like weather reports. Someone heard something. Someone else confirms it. You adjust behavior accordingly. This lateral spread of information keeps everyone aligned without confrontation. It also keeps anxiety diffused rather than concentrated. No one panics because no one knows everything at once. Food remains unchanged. Eating is quick. There is no ceremony beyond habit. Hunger is constant but manageable. Fullness is temporary and unremarkable. Comfort remains minimal. You no longer think of comfort as something to pursue. It is something that appears briefly when conditions align, then disappears. You accept this without disappointment. Evening comes again. The village settles. The same sounds repeat: insects, wind, distant movement. You lie down and notice how little emotional residue the day has left behind. Not numbness, exactly. More like efficiency. Feelings rise only when they serve a purpose, then fade. By the 14th day, feudal Japan has refined you into something functional, not happy, not miserable, useful, predictable, sustainable. You are no longer asking how long you could last here. You are simply lasting. And in a world built on endurance rather than resolution, that quiet continuation is the closest thing there is to success. By the 15th day, you notice that memory itself has begun to simplify. You remember what matters for survival and let the rest dissolve without resistance. Details from earlier days blur together, not because they were unimportant, but because they were similar. Feudal Japan does not distinguish days unless something interrupts them, and interruption is rare. You wake, work, eat, rest, and repeat, with a steadiness that no longer feels imposed. It feels structural, like gravity. Your body moves with practiced economy. There is little wasted motion left in you. Every action has been pared down to its essential form. You do not rush, but you do not linger. Lingering suggests uncertainty, and uncertainty invites scrutiny. So you act with quiet decisiveness, even in small things. This precision is not admired, it is assumed. You notice how people anticipate one another without speaking. Tools are passed before they are requested. Tasks shift smoothly when someone slows. This coordination is not planned. It is learned through long exposure to shared constraints. Communication is minimal because misunderstanding is costly. Authority surfaces briefly again today, not through presence, but through adjustment. A new expectation circulates. Something must be done slightly differently. No explanation is given. No one asks for one. You adapt, because adaptation is safer than understanding. Understanding implies the right to question. Questioning is inefficient. Food continues to arrive in its familiar form. You eat without thought. Hunger is no longer an event. It is a condition that is managed automatically. Comfort remains scarce, but you have stopped measuring its absence. Your internal scale has shifted so completely that what once felt intolerable now feels ordinary. This shift is unsettling only if you reflect on it, which you rarely do. Illness remains present but subdued. A few people work more slowly today. Others compensate without discussion. There is no heroism in this. It is simply maintenance. The system adjusts itself to preserve function. Evening arrives again, unremarkable and reliable. As you lie down, you realize that your sense of time has narrowed to the immediate, not out of fear, but out of efficiency. Planning too far ahead offers no advantage. The future will arrive with its own demands regardless of preparation. By the 15th day, feudal Japan has not crushed your individuality. It has made it irrelevant. What remains is a version of you that fits, that moves without friction, that occupies space without disturbance. This version is quieter, more contained, and far more durable than the one you arrived with. You fall asleep not thinking about tomorrow, because tomorrow has already been accounted for. By the 16th day, you realize that endurance here is not heroic, it is administrative. Survival is handled through small, continuous adjustments rather than moments of resolve. You do not wake up determined to be strong. You wake up aware of what must be done and how little deviation is allowed. This awareness guides you more reliably than motivation ever could. The day begins without comment. Tools are gathered, tasks resume. There is no sense of beginning, only resumption. You notice how rarely people reflect on the past. Reflection offers no advantage. What matters is whether the roof holds, whether the field produces, whether the work continues without disruption. Everything else is secondary. Your body continues to operate within narrowed margins. You feel stiffness more than pain now. Pain would demand attention. Stiffness can be worked through. You warm up slowly, not intentionally, but because sudden movement would be wasteful. This gradual start is mirrored everywhere. Nothing here moves abruptly unless something has gone wrong. Social interactions remain restrained. You exchange acknowledgments rather than greetings. Familiarity has replaced formality, but not intimacy. Intimacy would require vulnerability, and vulnerability requires safety that is not guaranteed. So, relationships remain practical. You know who will help you carry something heavy. You know who will watch your tools while you step away. This knowledge is earned slowly and maintained carefully. Authority remains a constant background presence. You feel it even when nothing specific is happening. This feeling shapes behavior more effectively than enforcement ever could. You correct yourself before anyone else needs to. You pause when unsure. You default to caution. Food arrives again, unchanged. Eating feels mechanical, but not unpleasant. Hunger no longer feels urgent. It feels scheduled. Your body expects less, and in expecting less, functions more reliably. Comfort is no longer something you miss. Missing implies memory, and memory has narrowed. You live in a compressed present where only immediate needs register. Evening comes again, indistinguishable from the last. The village settles into its familiar quiet. As you lie down, you notice how little resistance you feel toward this repetition. Not acceptance exactly, more like compatibility. By the 16th day, feudal Japan has shaped you into someone who can persist without complaint, without excess, and without expectation. This persistence is not celebrated. It is assumed, and in a system that values continuity above all else, being able to continue quietly is the highest qualification you can possess. By the 17th day, you understand that the most difficult adjustment was not physical, it was conceptual. You have learned to exist without the expectation of improvement. In feudal Japan, life does not move toward something better. It moves toward continuity. This realization settles into you without ceremony. You wake and do not ask whether today will be easier. Easier is not a category that applies. The day will simply require what it requires. Work resumes in its familiar sequence. You no longer think of tasks as burdens. They are conditions. Like weather, you respond to them rather than evaluate them. This removes a surprising amount of internal friction. You are not fighting the day. You are inhabiting it. Your body continues to feel worn, but the wear no longer alarms you. You know which sensations matter and which ones can be ignored. This distinction has been learned through repetition rather than instruction. You adjust automatically. A slower step here, a brief pause there. These micro-decisions keep you functional. Social life continues in its understated way. You notice that trust here is built less on affection and more on consistency. People trust you because you do what you are supposed to do, day after day, without explanation. Reliability becomes a form of character. It is quiet, but it is respected. Authority does not appear today, but it is felt in the way people double-check their work and maintain formality, even when no one is watching. This internalization of order is efficient. It means enforcement is rarely needed. The system runs on self-regulation. Food remains plain and sufficient. Eating is quick. There is no conversation around it unless something is missing. Silence is not awkward. It is efficient. You have stopped associating silence with loneliness. Loneliness implies separation. Here, separation would be dangerous. Even when alone, you are part of the structure. Illness does not visit today, but its possibility shapes behavior anyway. Tools are shared carefully. Hands are washed when water allows. People keep a measured distance without comment. Precaution is built into routine. Evening arrives again, unremarkable and expected. As you lie down, you realize that your internal sense of urgency has almost completely disappeared. There is nothing to hurry toward, nothing to escape into. Life here does not reward acceleration. It rewards steadiness. By the 17th day, feudal Japan no longer feels like something you are surviving. It feels like something you are maintaining. And maintenance, here, is not temporary work. It is the work. By the 18th day, you notice that even resistance has faded, not because conditions have improved, but because resistance has proven inefficient. Feudal Japan does not respond to inner opposition. It responds to alignment. You have learned this without being told. You wake with a body that knows its limits, and a mind that no longer tests them unnecessarily. The morning feels the same as every other morning, and that sameness has become a form of reassurance. Familiarity reduces risk. The work of the day resumes with quiet precision. You no longer think about how long tasks take. You think about whether they are done correctly enough to avoid attention. Perfection is not required. Adequacy is. Adequacy keeps things moving. Adequacy keeps you unnoticed. You realize now how much of life here is organized around invisibility. Being seen too clearly means being evaluated. Evaluation introduces change. Change introduces instability. So people learn to exist just below the threshold of notice. Useful, reliable, replaceable. This is not dehumanizing in the way it might sound. It is stabilizing. The system does not ask for more than it can sustain. Your body continues its quiet accounting. You feel tired, but not exhausted. Exhaustion would threaten function. You have learned how to stop just short of it. This skill is not taught. It is inherited through observation. You watch others and mirror their pacing. You learn when to pause and when to push. This collective regulation keeps the village operational even under strain. Social interactions continue with their familiar economy. Words are exchanged only when they add clarity. Gestures carry more meaning than speech. A slight nod, a pause, a shift in position. Everyone understands. Misunderstandings are rare because expression has been pared down to essentials. Authority remains distant today, but its logic shapes behavior anyway. People anticipate what will be required before it is asked. This anticipation reduces friction. Friction is costly. Food arrives again, predictable and sufficient. You eat without thinking, not because you are numb, but because eating has been fully integrated into routine. Hunger no longer disrupts thought. It exists, but it does not dominate. Evening comes as it always does. The village settles. The same sounds repeat themselves. You lie down and realize that you have stopped measuring your experience entirely. There is no internal commentary about whether this life is acceptable or not. Acceptability is no longer relevant. What matters is continuation. By the 18th day, feudal Japan has done what it does best. It has removed excess movement, excess thought, excess desire, and left behind something that functions steadily under pressure. You are still here, not because you fought to remain, but because you learned how to take up exactly as much space as the world allows. By the 19th day, you realize that survival here no longer feels active. It feels passive, but in a disciplined way. You are not pushing against life. You are letting it pass through you while you maintain shape. This is not resignation. It is efficiency taken to its logical conclusion. You wake without urgency, but not with ease. Ease would suggest slack, and slack would invite correction. The day resumes its familiar sequence. Tasks appear, are completed, and disappear again without comment. You do not think about whether they matter. Their existence is justification enough. Your body feels older now, not suddenly, but unmistakably. Movements are careful without being slow. You have learned where caution saves energy and where it wastes it. This knowledge has settled into muscle memory. You no longer think about how to work, you simply work. Social life continues in its restrained equilibrium. You notice that bonds here are built on shared persistence rather than shared emotion. People recognize one another through presence, through showing up, through continuing. There is comfort in this recognition, even if it is never spoken aloud. Authority makes a brief appearance today, perhaps only as a reminder passed along by someone else. A small change in expectation, a minor adjustment in routine. Everyone adapts immediately. No one asks why. The system absorbs the change and continues. This adaptability is not flexibility in the modern sense. It is controlled elasticity, enough to prevent breaking, not enough to invite disorder. Food arrives again, as it always does. You eat and feel neither satisfaction nor disappointment. Eating has become maintenance, like repairing a tool or reinforcing a beam. Necessary, neutral. You begin to understand how this way of living reshapes people over years rather than days. It produces individuals who are durable, cautious, and deeply aware of limits. Not unhappy, but not indulgent. Capable of enduring long stretches of difficulty without expecting recognition or reward. Evening arrives again. Lamps are lit sparingly. Voices soften. You lie down and notice that even reflection feels optional now. There is nothing unresolved that can be resolved through thought. Tomorrow will come, and you will meet it as you have met every other day. By the 19th day, feudal Japan has made its expectations clear. It does not ask whether you approve. It asks whether you can continue, and at this point, you can. Not because you are strong, but because you have been shaped into something that fits. By the 20th day, the idea of arrival finally dissolves. There is no moment where you feel established, no internal signal that says you have succeeded. Feudal Japan does not provide that kind of feedback. What it offers instead is ongoing permission to remain. You wake and understand, without thinking about it, that this is simply how things are now. The floor is still hard. The air is still cool or heavy, depending on the season. Your body still carries its familiar stiffness. None of this feels remarkable. It feels structural, like the shape of the room or the slope of the land. Work begins again, not as an obligation imposed from outside, but as a condition that exists whether you engage with it emotionally or not. You engage because disengagement would only make things harder. This is the final adjustment. You no longer frame your actions as endurance. Endurance implies an endpoint. Here, there is none. You are not enduring feudal Japan. You are participating in it. Your movements are calm and precise. You expend exactly the amount of energy required, and no more. This balance is not accidental. It is learned, refined, and enforced by quiet consequences. You see now how people last decades here, not through optimism or hope, but through calibration. They adjust their expectations downward until friction disappears. This does not erase difficulty. It makes difficulty manageable. Social life continues in its measured form. You recognize faces not by affection, but by reliability. These are the people who will be here tomorrow. That knowledge is enough. Authority remains distant, but its presence is embedded everywhere, in posture, in timing, in the careful way people move through shared space. You no longer experience this as pressure. Pressure has become ambient. It is simply part of the environment, like humidity or wind. Food arrives again, unchanged. You eat without reflection. Hunger is now a background condition, not a problem to solve. Comfort, as you once defined it, is no longer something you seek. You have learned a different scale. On this scale, survival without disruption is sufficient. Anything beyond that would feel excessive, even irresponsible. Evening comes again, quiet and predictable. The village settles. Lamps dim. Sounds soften. You lie down and notice that there is no final thought, no summary judgment about this life. There does not need to be one. Feudal Japan does not ask for conclusions. It asks for continuity. And by this point, you are capable of providing it. Looking back, the question of whether you would last a day here feels almost misleading. A day is too short to matter. What matters is whether you can adjust your expectations, your body, and your sense of self enough to persist without resistance. Many people did, quietly, repeatedly, without leaving records that celebrate their effort. That is why their lives can be hard to imagine now. They were not dramatic, they were not exceptional, they were functional. And in feudal Japan, functionality was survival. You fall asleep without relief and without dread. Tomorrow will be much like today. And that, finally, is the point.